The subject today is connecting emunah and bitachon, faith and confidence, into the mind. We started last time. We didn't get very far with it, and we built it in a certain direction. Now, all these things are like certain meditations, like different meditations of different aspects of faith and confidence. So today we'll be looking at how they are in chokhmah and bina, in wisdom and in understanding, and how they relate again to writing. We're going to come back to that again today, and the importance of writing things out and not just leaving them in our minds.
When you say writing, do you also mean speaking? Or writing is still stronger?
Writing.
Wow.
Creating a book. Creating something that can be... Okay. So the question starts... The question itself is very theoretical. It starts from the whole concept of tefillin. Tefillin, a very interesting thing, that we wear something written on our heads. It's almost like telling you right away, you can't leave things as just thoughts. You have to actually that tefillin sort of tell you that you can't stay in a state where things are just locked into your head. They have to come out, and you have to write them. And not only do you have to write them, but after they're written, you could just have scattered thoughts. So especially the tefillin in the head that are divided into four chambers. Into each one you put a separate parchment. It's like telling you that these different thoughts have to be organized. It's not just that they need to be written. They actually have to be organized at first. And then the tefillin in the hand tell you that in the end you have to write a story from them. Because in the hand, all four paragraphs that are in the tefillin in the head, they're written on one single parchment. And the one parchment is put in one chamber, and just in one box. In the head, it's divided into four separate chambers inside the box. So it's like telling you that you have to organize your thoughts, first of all, but they have to be written. So they can be scraps of paper, but you have to organize them. You have to have some kind of order. And the amazing thing is that the halacha says this is how the Talmud describes this, is that tefillin are written miyamin lakoreh. The parchments are organized in the order that somebody reading them on your head would read them. Meaning that for me, I would go from right to left in Hebrew. But in tefillin, you order them from left to right as if somebody else is already reading them. So that's like another piece of advice, that when you order things that you wrote down, these scraps of paper, these notes, you should already order them in the order that somebody else would read them, not in the order that makes sense to you. It's very important. Already at that level where it's just ideas, just thoughts, you already have to order them in the order that somebody else that would read them would understand what was going on. They would have some kind of development in it. So now this is not very common today for most people, unfortunately, but it's becoming more common because of social media. A lot of people write. It used to be that you were on the phone, and so everything was oral. But we know today that it's easier to write, actually. Why? Because first of all, you get to a lot more people. So if you want to tell your latest news, so if you're, as they say, if you're a cat, you use Instagram because cats can't type. So you take a picture. But if you're a person, so either you use Twitter, if you can write at least 140 characters, or you use Facebook or WhatsApp. You can broadcast to a lot of people. Facebook, obviously, more than WhatsApp. Beyond that, Facebook is not very good for long posts, even though in Israel, for some strange reason, it's become the place that everybody writes their blog, which really makes zero sense. It doesn't make any sense because you can't read, and there's no good comment, no good way to comment. There's no good way to handle a discussion. It's very rudimentary. But if you're really writing, you write to a blog, and then with a blog, then you already have a whole threading system where people can comment and you can answer and comment on it and so on. And it gets more and more complex. So it's making a big comeback. That people sharing what they have is becoming like, the blogs are becoming like the new notebooks. It's basically how you need to work. A blog is not, the way I see it, is not for finished products. It's not for a book. You don't write a book there. But what people used to have as notebooks, use as a blog. So sometimes you want a private blog, one that you don't want anybody else to read for whatever reason, because so you build this on there's apps that are private, like One Day or whatever else it might be, that you use it to take notes. I still use an actual notebook, and unfortunately the type of notebooks that I like are only made in Austria. So I swallow my.
What's special about
Why?
It's got all this special, simple thing, which is needed in a notebook if you want to actually be not hindered by lines, or not too free-flowing without any lines. You need something in between. So the simplest thing they did was that it's like dotted. So he's got a grid of dots. They're very light. So they're enough to follow if you want to write something, but they're also open enough that if you want to draw something, or you want to make a chart, or you have something more free-flowing, or you want to, and it's open, it's still open. So it's a very simple idea that I just have never found anywhere. I imagine in America there is something like this, but I don't get to America, and they don't bring that stuff here. So the stuff
But you're
that I
also
have.
talking about writing books.
So how do you really write a book? So it used to be very common. That's what I was getting to. It used to be very common that writers, and I think they still do this, and you'll see this like in blogs and so on, is that the ideas that come, you don't wait until you have a full book. And let's say you're writing something, even if it's just prose, even if it's just a novel, you don't wait until you have the full story. But rather, as you get bits and pieces, like interesting events, right? You write them down almost disconnected, just like the Parsha and the Tefillin would be. It's like they're disconnected from one another. They don't really tell a full story. Each one is telling a little piece of something. And so these things, you write them down, and over time you collect enough things, and they begin to form a storyline in your head. But they begin with smaller pieces. If you're writing something that's intellectual, that's more what we call in Hebrew yun, which is like nonfiction, an analysis of something, or something that's again that's more philosophical, or whatever you want, an idea, a book of ideas. So certainly that's the way it works. It's very hard to flesh out a full argument that's going to take up 200, 300 pages to write out with just one idea. It's usually, it's a series of ideas that form in your head, and then people collect these notebooks, or the people that I've seen, or like Rav Ginsburg, or other rabbis that I've seen how they work. So they have these sheets of paper, each one has an idea, or they do in a notebook, every time they put an entry in. So there's another idea. They stand apart, they're separate. Rav Kook, for instance, all his writing, from beginning to end, are his journals. They call these journals. He never wrote a real book. There's only one book that he really wrote from beginning to end, which is very, very cryptic. People don't even learn it. But the way that you do these things is you have to let things be disconnected first. You can't really connect them. So that's the process of going from the tefillin of the head to the tefillin of the hand. Meaning that in the head, really what you're doing is, as you write out these small, short pieces, is you're organizing your thoughts. But you can't organize your thoughts without writing them. They also have to be written. It's the same thing, by the way, if you're doing, I don't understand much about it, but I understand that the same thing happens in music. that you have to have whatever comes to mind, you have to write it down right away. So today, I guess you wouldn't write it down. Most people don't write sheet music. Instead, you record it. And you record it, and then you have this recording, that recording, that recording, and slowly things begin to develop into something more whole. And that's what the hand fill-in represent, that everything is on one scroll already, and it's written like a real story, like from beginning to end. Okay, so that's a very important process. First of all, that fill-in tell us about the difference between how things are in your head, organizing your thoughts, which are related to the head, to the mind, rather than how you actually tell the story, which is already related to the heart, which is a more flowing type of experience.
What happens when people have experiences that everything comes out at once? Is that like the keter is just open? I know it's rare, but like that they don't go through that process.
You have to try to catch as much as you can.
Uh-huh.
What can you do?
No, I'm saying sometimes people, I do feel they can, like a whole song can come out and they didn't,
wonderful.
It didn't come in parts.
Wonderful. So that
it's like they missed a stage.
So either it's a short thing, it's not a full symphony. There were people like Mozart, a full symphony would just come out from. Yes, that would be a keter experience. That's not normal. That's not the way we work.
Right.
We don't build on that.
You can't go for it. Yeah.
You can. It just sometimes it happens. It's sort of like a tear in the fabric of space, and something comes out suddenly all at once.
Mm-hmm.
But normally, the way things build is that they slowly develop, and you have all these little pieces, little thoughts, or movements in music, or phrases. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. People that write will suddenly, there's a turn of a phrase that strikes them, or a way to describe something, because most good fiction is all about the metaphors you use. It's not just the story. It's how you say something, and that captures. It's like poetry in a certain sense. Poetry is like, for me, it was always somebody who couldn't put the prose together. They stayed at the level of poetry. But good fiction, good prose, is built on many, many, many small poems, and many small turns of the phrase, which then become something longer, or become embellished, or they become part of a bigger picture, and then that becomes more interesting. But if you read good prose, you see that there's many sentences that you could take out, and they would just be a poem in and of themselves. Okay, so really that's called, now we'll give them the Kabbalistic names, that the head, the tefillin that go on the head, they're more related to what we call the mind of father, mochin de Abba, and the hand tefillin, they're more related to what we call mochin de Ima. Okay, they're more the mother principle, more related to the feminine. So first of all, you see that this is a big difference between the masculine and the feminine. That the masculine is more punctuated. It comes piece by piece, whereas the feminine is more flowing. It's much longer. It has this it has this ability to connect many parts together and to bring them together. And that's really how the difference between the way that many men and women speak is. The men will speak very briefly. Here's the whole experience. It's a poem. You have to understand it as a poem. And women will want to embellish on it and take their time and so on. And this causes can cause a lot of misunderstandings, as if the man didn't experience nothing happened to you. What's going on? Why do you have nothing to say? It's poetic. One word might be enough. Captures the whole idea. But by women, it needs more. Again, making it into a scroll, into something that you try to piece all the parts together. You try to make it into some coherent whole, into something that afterwards makes sense of you. That really is one of the best ways to understand the difference between Chokhmah and Bina. The Chokhmah is the more punctuated understanding of things, wisdom and insight into something, which might be very short, like a poem, and And Bina and understanding tends to take things together and to make a construct out of them, to fit all the pieces together. It's by the way, like when I give a shir, I'm piecing things together as I talk. I've thought about it before, but I haven't spoken it. So because I haven't spoken it, the storyline is not finished. So as I speak, I'm beginning to understand what the story behind it all is, like what threads it through, what really brings everything together into a coherent whole. So a lot of times when I come out of a shir, for instance, I feel really very enlightened by the shir, because even though I thought of the concept, I read them before, I learned them before, but I didn't try to say them. I didn't try to, again, and the next stage would of course be to write them. Then you see how much of what you said was not coherent, didn't follow a storyline. It becomes a storyline in your head as you're speaking. So you have to know this we have to know this about ourselves, especially women need to know this, that the need to speak is really the need to make sense of things. Right. Really, that's what understanding really is. It's called tevuna in Hebrew. Tevuna is making sense. It's not just understanding it, it's also making sense of it. It's making it into a coherent whole. It's something that's missing from experience itself. We talked last week about experience versus 2 weeks ago. Last week we talked about the difference between experience and explanation. We said that experience is the more masculine, even though that's not what I would have thought originally. I would have thought that chavaya, like the modern Hebrew word, is related to the feminine. But it turns out that experience is punctuated. There's nothing that threads experience together. There's nothing that makes it coherent. That's what we do with language. That's what we do by talking. So this whole idea of taking tefillin and on the head they're punctuated, they're separated into 4 different scrolls, and on the arm, which is keneged, that's across from the heart, it comes to reflect the heart, everything is put on a single scroll. There's a difference between having experiences versus having a coherent sense of wholeness in everything that happened and understanding what the story was.
Last week it sounded like the feminine process happens prior to the masculine process. Like the masculine is that final manifestation, and,
right.
and the feminine was the inner, and now it sounds the opposite.
Right. So
which one really happens
by Hashem,
first?
it's like sof maaseh b'machshava tchila.
Okay.
By Hashem, if it's really directed action, if I'm doing things with a goal in mind, with some direction in mind, so yes, I have thought that tries to build a coherent whole even before. But then we wouldn't call it really, as we'll call it today, it's not the book form of what's about to happen. Meaning I'm not, say it this way, that you can try, but you can't really, let's say somebody wrote a book and you want to now turn it into a play or turn it into a movie, and you want to turn it into actions that actors will take. So there's a whole process to first taking it apart and then putting it back together again through direction. It's not something that you can't just take the book the way it is and then, here's reality. Because reality has a way of breaking apart your all your goals, all your thoughts. And that's what we mean that reality is punctuated in the end. You have to then put it back together again, which is what direction does. And that you try to retell a story, retell really what was in the book if you're doing a play or doing a movie, retelling it in a way that actually makes sense on the stage or makes sense on the screen.
It's like feminine, masculine, feminine.
Right. The direction would be the feminine, the second feminine, trying to put it back together again. So yes, these things always relate, and sometimes, again, Hashem had a thought about what he wanted from the world. He had a story that he wanted to tell. But when it actually came to telling the story, when he actually started getting the actors and everybody here to put it together, suddenly, wait a minute, it's not a one-to-one reflection of what of what the goal was, even not the goal, but the point was in the beginning. And now you have to retell, you have to restructure, you have to reunite all the various actions that you see into some kind of coherent whole. So that's a very big deal. Okay, so all this has to do with faith and confidence, believe it or not. How does this have to do with it? This is sort of the difference, well, not just sort of, it kind of cuts to the essence of the difference between passive confidence and active confidence. We said that active confidence is like when I can actually take action. I know what needs to be done, and I want to take action. I'm able, I have the tools to bring about the result that I want. And we said, that's what Hashem put me here for. That's why I'm here. That's why my neshama is here, my soul is here, in this body, in this life, in order to enact my mission.
But if you don't have the tools and you have that same desire, then
Right.
that's
Then we
a
call
higher
it
level.
passive confidence.
No, but you have to combine your active with a passive. Because you know it, you're ready to do it. You're
No,
acting
passive
on it, but you
confidence-
don't have all the tools that say.
I don't know all the tools. Whatever you have to do, that's called active confidence. Whatever you can't do, which is not in your hands, you need to have passive confidence about. But it's still confidence. It's still an inner conviction that this will happen.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
And I know how it needs to happen. I know what the final result should look like. Okay?
don't
But I'm
leave some
passive
space-
because I don't have the tools for that.
But you can't leave some space in there for Hashem, like to show you.
That is, it's all Hashem.
But you don't know
My
exactly. Let's say
confidence-
you don't know exactly how it's supposed to come out.
So then
because
it's
you-
not confidence yet. Then it's only faith.
it feels
Confidence
arrogant
is
if
when
know
I have
exactly.
a picture of what needs to happen.
Right, picture, and you're doing it. But
If I don't have any picture, that's like faith.
but what if you have a good picture and it's but there's a
And you don't have the tools, then that's called passive confidence. You still have to have 100% confidence that that picture that you have in your mind is what will happen. Because that's what Hashem put you here, in order to figure these things out. Person says, I want to be happy. So it's very nice. That's faith.
Vague.
That's faith. I have faith that I can be happy. And the future holds happiness for me. But if you want to actually have confidence, if you want to fulfill your role in life as a soul that's not just in heaven, but also down here on earth, that it means that you have to picture, what does it mean for you to be happy? What will that entail? Okay.
Can you have 100% confidence about something and
You have
it's
to.
still vague? Meaning you're 100% confident that it will manifest? You just,
No.
even though you don't see the deals, you're 100%
Again, if it's vague, then it's not
But what if you're
confidence.
100% confident? You are. You're confident. You just
Yeah, I
can't
think
see how
that-
Hashem's going to make it work, but you're
That's
confident.
passive confidence. Because I don't know how to do
But
it.
do you have to work on the picture then? Or if
What?
you,
Yes, of course.
but what if you...
When we get to chapter 8, we'll be talking a
Okay.
lot about how to work on the picture.
Okay.
Right now, we're just working on the
You
on the
can't force
concepts
the picture
themselves.
if you can't see the solution.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. Then you have to have faith. But in order to have confidence, again, means that I was put here in order to figure out what needs to be done. I have to have that for confidence. It could be, again, like we said, that the two extremes are David HaMelech, King David, who has the picture in his mind of how he is going to pursue his enemies and not return until he's finished every single last one of them. That means that he knows every single last one of them. He knows exactly what they look like.
But
He's
he doesn't
seen
know
them
exactly
before.
how he's gonna
Oh, he
finish
knows
off
exactly how he's going to finish
each
them
one.
off.
how he's
Each
gonna
one.
chop
Every
them up or
single one.
whatever.
Yeah. Every single one. He has to have a picture like that.
This
As
one
opposed
I'm
to
gonna stab in the heart.
Chizkiyahu.
This one I'm gonna chop his head off.
Yep.
He knows
He
that's
knows.
how
He
detailed
knows.
it is.
That's
Your
how detailed
picture.
it is in a person like that.
And us, we should be that detailed too. I know what my big pictures. I know. I feel I have this built
Yeah, the more detail
but
you
I don't
have,
know
the-
if I want to leave some of it to Hashem's. Like I don't know.
So Hashem would like you not to leave it. So
Oh,
what-
okay, I'm
what-
getting it. I'm like,
it would be the
that's
same
really,
thing.
really confidence in
It would-
me, not. I don't know.
It would be the same thing as saying, I have an idea of what I want to write, but I'm going to leave some of it to the paper. Whatever comes out.
No, to leave it to that higher part of you.
Yeah, the
that
higher
flows
okay,
through.
whatever comes out. I won't edit it. Doesn't matter. No, of course. If you want to write something, that serves the purpose of what you're writing, it has to be in review, it has to be in front of you, you have to see it.
I know that when I see, you were talking before about, like, I see phrases or words or things about something, and it catches me, those 3 words, or that just totally, that's what I vibrate to write.
Good.
Then other times, something comes to me, it feels like from my soul, higher than my chachma, that all of a sudden those words will come in, and it's from something higher than me gathering it from. Is that too
Doesn't
different?
matter where it comes from.
Oh.
It matters what you do with it. You could read it somewhere else. It could come to you from thin air,
Okay.
and it could come from who knows what.
It's all from Hashem anyway.
Yeah.
Sometimes waiting for the details so much as you say, that might stop somebody
Right.
from doing something.
Right, that's what we said, that whatever comes to you, you have to treat it like head filling. You write down whatever you have and you organize it from time to time. It used to be so common that people did this, that there are many journals that were published as books because the people didn't get around. They were very accomplished, either thinkers or writers or whatever it was, and they never got around to finishing, to getting to the final product of coherently threading it all together. But the journal is so interesting because you see many of the thoughts of what have ended up becoming whatever the final work was going to be. That's why from time to time you also have to take stock of your own life in the same way, because life is punctuated. Because we don't know what the exact significance of things are. That's why they pass us by and we don't remember them. Cheshbon nefesh, why is it called cheshbon? Cheshbon is bina, comes from bina. It's from understanding. A cheshbon nefesh means that every evening I try to draw a coherent whole out of what happened to me that day. I have to have, otherwise I won't remember it. I didn't finish the process. That's why people talk so much today about journaling, where what they really mean, the journaling that's done today, is not just writing down thoughts and experiences that come to mind, but the journaling that's done at the end of the day is really an attempt to coherently connect everything that happened to me that day. And the coherence is bina. That's cheshbon nefesh that you do at the end of the day. And so I really can't recommend it enough. In previous years, not everybody could do this easily. So people, cheshbon nefesh meant that they just went through what happened during the day and they tried to connect it all together. They tried to understand. It's called bo cheshbon. Bo cheshbon, by the way, was usually used for the end of life journaling, call it, for when a person's life is coming to an end, to try to pull everything together, to understand the coherency of it all. People weren't afraid of this. They realized this is part of what you need to do. As every day draws to a close, that's like the end of a lifetime. You have to do a cheshbon. And the cheshbon is really to try as much as you can to thread it all together, to bring it all together. Obviously, you're only still seeing part of the picture. It's going to continue developing. But if you miss that part of the day, then many people would say that the punctuated events that happened, that the discrete events, discrete ETE, not EET, that happened never formed into a continuum. They never connected. And they don't really affect your mind in the day to come. They're lost. They just become pebbles. There's even the book by Rav Steinsaltz that they called Pebbles of Wisdom. It's very, very fitting. I don't know who thought of the name. I'm sure he did. But the idea is that wisdom is punctuated. It's like pebbles. It's not a wall. It's certainly not a building. In wisdom, you get points. You get points of wisdom. I think that's a name that we called it. And then it needs to be brought together. All these pebbles need to be brought together and made into something, into some whole. Okay, so you need this end of day journaling in order to try to connect. Or, as many people do, they talk to each other at the end of the day, and that itself serves some of that purpose. but that's the hand tefillin. That's the idea of ima. That's the idea. Okay. So all that's good and well. But now we have to get into something a little bit more, which is that there are two types of tefillin. From the Baal Shem Tov and on, it became very common for men, all Hasidic men, really don 2 pairs of tefillin. And some people do it at bar mitzvah, and some when they get married. But from the Baal Shem Tov, this became a very big deal to have 2 pairs of tefillin. They're called Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. And the relationship between them is Chochmah and Bina also. That Rabbeinu Tam, the pair that's not so common, that the Baal Shem Tov encouraged people to wear, is the wisdom. It's the father. And the Rashi tefillin, they're the mother. They're the understanding, the Bina. So they have a relationship between them. Why did the Baal Shem Tov add this pair of tefillin? Why did he want this to be done by his followers? Because, like we understood in the last few classes, the Baal Shem Tov's big revolution was in faith in confidence. It was having faith in confidence, believing that we can be confident about what we need to achieve. That we can achieve what we want through confidence, and not just through faith. Faith was like an understanding, like we said, that we'll make it through exile. It's continuous faith, and it's faith that the future will be good, everything will turn out okay, but it is not connected to what I have confidence in, what I can achieve and what I can't. It's not up to me and my life's mission. The Baal Shem Tov's big switch was that now it's up to me. Hashem has given us the keys, if you want, the keys to our future. And he said, now it depends on you. So the Baal Shem Tov, with this switch, also had to add something in terms of a mitzvah. He had to add something in terms of an act that we do that will provide a vessel for this light to come down.
So it was an actual new light. It wasn't just the revealed Hasidus. It was actually a new...
It's like, for now, and because of the destruction of the temple, there was no place for this light to come down. In a certain sense, the temple was the vessel when it existed. And now, there's something missing. So there had to be a new vessel. It's not really new. It was always existed. It was always from the time we have tefillin. We know that there were two. The whole difference is in the order of the parchments. That's the whole difference. They're exactly the same. They're tied a little bit differently. The stitching is done a little bit differently, so that somebody can tell from the outside what's inside, because you can't really open it because it's all stitched. But this was a vessel that wasn't so common. It certainly wasn't common by regular people. People didn't put Rabbeinu Tam tefillin on. And just to explain, technically, Rabbeinu Tam is the name of the grandson of Rashi, who writes in his commentary in the Tosafot the Shita, what do you call it? The
approach.
The approach that the ruling that the parchments have to be in a different order than what Rashi writes. So they're called Rabbeinu Tam Tefillin, but they're not really. He didn't invent them or anything. He's the one who brings down that Masoret.
What's the connection with the temple?
Oh,
You just said it. I didn't get it.
So the connection with the temple is long and a little bit too difficult to dwell on it right now, but both the tefillin are related to the temple, and you can see that from their shape right away. The first thing that tefillin are supposed to awaken in you, it's like, why do Jews walk around with these boxes on their heads? It's not just boxes. You see the shape is very similar to the shape of the temple. It's like a building. It's like a miniature architect's, mock-up of what the temple was like. So both of them have to do with the temple, but they have to do with different sides of the temple. The temple itself, the Beis HaMikdash in itself, had two different reasons for existing. It's like the Rebbe used to bring this as a machlokas, as like a dispute between the Rambam and the Ramban. What is the main point of the temple? According to the Rambam, the main thing in the temple is the service that was done. So the focal point of the temple and the part that needs divine revelation is the location of the altar. That's the main thing. Hmm? Everything is Shekhinah. Everything is Shekhinah. Yeah. The question is, what does the Shekhinah come by? Does it come by the Avoda, or the way the Ramban, the way the Pnimius Torah understands it, that the main thing, the focal point of the temple was the ark, where the ark sits. Why? Because the purpose of the temple is to bring out Torah. That's the main thing. That's where new Torah comes from. So right away we understand who's what. That the Pnimius Torah is about the new revelations of Torah that come out, and they come out in a punctuated form. And we'll talk about this more as we advance here. And the service, again, this is just because you mentioned how's the temple got to do with it. So in the service, which is more continuous, the avoda never stops. So the avoda, the service that was done in the temple, that is more like the feminine side, which is the coherence of it all. The Torah that came out wasn't concealed, you didn't see it. The ark wasn't in plain sight, nobody knew where it was. There's only the two wooden beams that were covered by gold that protruded a little through the curtain, so you could see that. But there was you couldn't see the ark itself. It comes from something hidden. It's more hidden inside. That's like wisdom in general, which is more hidden. And the service was done in plain sight. It's right in front of you. Here it is. So clearly Rashi is like the service on the altar, and Rabbeinu Tam is the chidushim, the new novel ideas that come out of the ark.
In general, in Judaism, when there are different opinions, we don't do the mitzvah twice or do it two ways. Like, I'm saying this seems to be like
many people
one-off.
wear more than one pair of tefillin, and many
No, I'm saying
people
this, but
wear more than one tzitzis. There were people who actually made this into a big deal. And I'll tell you more than that, that there's a whole question with a lot of people who are left-handed.
Right.
What hand should they put tefillin on? So many people put on both hands. Many lefties do both hands. I myself went to ask 20 different rabbis to get upset from everybody in the world that I only needed to put on my right hand. I'm a lefty, but I'm the lefty in a way that there's no question about whether I need to also put on like a regular person. I'm really convoluted, like completely.
There's some lefties that wouldn't. What would be the difference? I'm also a lefty. I have a son who's a lefty. But what would make a lefty?
On how you write. And how you write. If you can only write with your left hand, you have no ability. I mean, it's a test. It's like, let's see how you can write. Obviously, if I would work on it, I would become more right hand, but I have no incentive now. Because I don't have time for putting on four times.
I guess what I'm saying is you can take any mitzvah, there's myriads of opinions for
Right,
every way of
right.
observing. I could make myself crazy, do every mitzvah 1,000 different ways until I make sure I get it right.
So that's
But
why
like-
it's so important. See,
And
that's
also, is
why
that not called adding
it's
on
such
to
a
the
good thing
mitzvah?
that you're a woman. That you don't have to put tefillin on.
Not just tefillin, but I'm saying any, like, imagine people show up a few different lobes and asterisks to cover all the opinions.
You try, in halacha in general, you try to cover as much ground as you can.
It's not considered adding on to the mitzvah, you're
No,
meant to do it once.
No, you can't say the bracha twice.
Fine.
But you
can
try to build your lulav and esrog in such a way
covering
that you cover as many opinions as you can. That you do. Once you've done it, that's it. And by Rabbeinu Tam, we don't say the bracha the
Right.
second time,
Okay.
only the first time on the Rashi.
Mm.
Okay, so we're getting a little bit too technical. What is important to know about Rabbeinu Tam is that he was very, very steadfast. You could not make him budge. He's famous for it. That once he had formed his opinion, it didn't matter how many opposing ideas somebody would bring or opposing arguments to his opinion would be brought, he would shoot them all down. He was very adamant about his idea. And that's that's what's hiding behind the active confidence of the right side. That there's a lot of forcefulness there to do something. And it has to be my way. And it can't be any other way. There's no, the malleability is not in the active confidence. When you're doing, you have to do or don't do. Don't do wishy-washy.
This is masculine or feminine?
Masculine.
Masculine.
That's the right side, the netzach.
Mhm.
The left side is also very confident in what it wants, but it says I can't do it. So there's also not very much malleability, at least in terms of the plan. The plan is very set. That's what separates confidence from faith. In faith, there's a ton of malleability. There's so much malleability, in fact, that there's no me. And everything can happen, because Hashem is in charge here. That's where the malleability really comes from. And really, there's a run and return in the soul between the two. So it's never that you're so forceful that you would destroy something because it has to be your way.
Like that would be something, that's what I would expect.
We actually started with this picture that
That would be arrogant almost.
it's not just arrogance.
Scenes or something.
It's actual. I mean, there's no better word for it, unfortunately, so I have to use it. It's like raping reality. You can't do that. You have to. You even as strong, as forceful as you are, as convinced as you are of what you're doing, there has to be an acceptance from reality. If reality doesn't accept it, then you're just running into a brick wall, and both of you are going to break. So that's not the point. There's no point like that. But there's no malleability in terms of, like, I'm going to change what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. I don't break reality because it didn't work. I have to go back and start a new line maybe, or regroup, rethink. But once you do, you should do. You should do all the way through. So again, the reason that this doesn't really break reality is because active confidence is more punctuated than passive confidence. There's more of a sense of discrete actions in active confidence than there is in passive confidence. Passive confidence can be a story. It can be something that's already coherent. Whereas active confidence, which comes from the right side, like the Rabbeinu Tam Tefillin, is more punctuated. It's more piece by piece it comes out.
Why is this story passive confidence? It's like the final form. It
Mhm.
should be. It's not passive at all. It's actually manifestation,
So if you're writing a book, yes,
right?
but all the pieces are already there. You're because you already have a story.
You have to fight for it, but it's
No,
not
it's
passive.
passive confidence because I'm not fighting for it.
No, I'm saying you don't have to fight for it, but like we describe passive confidence as if like you're sort of like before manifestation, but the story is the final manifestation.
Okay, so now let's see it. So to answer that question, which is leading up to this. So the best way to see it is in the difference between active and passive confidence here is to look at them in terms of the miftzayim of the Rebbe. Rebbe is a miftzayim, so if you've learned any amount of time with Rebbe Ginsburg, so you've probably heard this model of the 10 miftzayim. The Rebbe, over the years, he gave 10 different campaigns. The first one was the Tefillin campaign before 1967, before the 6-Day War. That's really when he started it. And afterwards, from time to time, he added more campaigns. So, you probably heard this, but it doesn't hurt to review it, or maybe you haven't heard it. So the way to correspond the campaigns to the Sfirot is like this, that the Chokhmah is the Torah campaign. To learn Torah. The Bina, the understanding, is the Tefillin campaign, like we said. Then come the 3 feminine campaigns. And they correspond to Chesed, Gvura, and Tiferes. So, what are the three mitzvahs that women have? Chana, right? Not just your name, but also the acronym for the three mitzvahs. Chala, Nida, Adlakat Hanor. So it's taking chala, family purity, and lighting Shabbos candles. So these correspond to loving kindness, might, and beauty. So loving kindness is easy to see that it's loving kindness is about light. So that's the Shabbos candles, lighting Shabbos candles. It's adding light into the house. And then the might is chala, is taking something out. Chala genemin. It's like might, removing something, taking challah from your dough. And then the one that's beauty is family purity. It also has a lot to do with how to convince women that it's a good thing to keep family purity, because that's Tiferes. That's the basis of the home. Tiferet Adam Lashevet Bayit. That the basis of the home is the family purity. It's good for everything in the home. Everything that has to do with Shalom Bayit revolves around family purity. By the Rebbe, this was essential, that if there were no children, whatever was wrong in the relationship between the husband and wife in the home, whatever was wrong in the home, he always sent people to relearn the laws of family purity and to be more stringent about things and maybe to cover more bases. Exactly that, to be able to cover more things in the way that they have. The next two campaigns are the ones we're going to focus on. So in Victory, in Netzach, we have Chinuch, which literally means education, but really means a lot more. And I've never found an English word for Chinuch. I don't think there is one. There's no English word that captures what Chinuch means in Hebrew. And then the Hod, the acknowledgement, which is like passive confidence, is a house full of books. So, active confidence is chinuch, it's educating, but passive confidence is a house full of books, is books. You can already begin to see the difference between educating and between having books in your home. One's active, and books are passive, and there's already a finished product. It's something that you keep, you put on your walls, but it's not something active. Books don't speak, at least the books that we have don't speak yet. Maybe in some future they will. But there's audiobooks, but those are not books. They don't count. If you have 1,000 audiobooks on your phone, that doesn't mean a house full of books. Books has to be actual books. And then the foundation is tzedakah, the tzedakah campaign. And then kingdom is the mezuzah campaign. Inside all of these was the Love of Israel campaign, Ahavat Yisrael, or Achdut Yisrael.
What does it mean?
That's
inside?
Dat.
Dat.
It's the consciousness that drives all of it.
Dat is love of Israel.
Okay. Achdut Yisrael, the unification of all Israel. And the Rebbe many times said that when we do our 10, then you have 10. If you add Dat, then you have 10 here. And when we do our 10 campaigns, Hashem does His campaign. What's His campaign? Mashiach. That's the way it was in the first years. Eventually, the Rebbe said, it's not enough. That we have to do Mashiach. That it's not just enough to say that Hashem will bring Mashiach. That it's up to us. That Hashem is, as it were, giving us the keys to that also. It's up to us. So that's the crown. But now we want to focus on active and passive confidence, which are in victory and in acknowledgement. Netzach and Hod, which we said are educating. That's the active confidence on the right side, the end of the right side. And acknowledgement, the passive confidence, which is a house full of books. So now let's tie this back into everything that we discussed in the beginning. That when you educate, you can't be telling a story. It doesn't work that way. It's punctuated. It's true that every sentence that you say, if it's poetic, it has a lot more impact. But it's not necessarily true that you have to wait until you have a whole story in order to educate. How did the Rebbe used to say this? When you know Aleph, you teach Aleph. It doesn't matter if you know Bet. It doesn't matter if you know the whole story yet. Because education works by punctuated events. Each event stands, hopefully poetically, on its own. Aleph is a poem. It stands for Emet Lamed Picha. That's already a line out of a poem. Teach your mouth to speak truth. That's what the acronym Aleph, the name of the letter, means. So if you know Aleph, if you know how to tell people, how to encourage people to speak truth, you already know Aleph. It's a beautiful part of the poem. But it's not a whole story. To tell a story, it's not enough to know one letter. You need to know a lot of letters. And you need to know how to thread them together. And you need to know in the end how to write a book. But that's passive confidence. The books that are finished, they are sources of passive confidence. They're not sources of active confidence. Why? Because they've already happened. The story, once it's already happened, can be written down. But that's not where you exercise active confidence. Active confidence is as you're going along and doing things. You need active confidence. That's education. In a certain sense, you're educating yourself with all your actions. You're educating your surroundings. You're educating the world. Even though this is a word that in Hebrew, if you say this today, it's a faux pas. You're not allowed to say this word anymore. Al techanech oti.
Yeah.
Don't tell me what to do. So you have to be very poetic. You have to be very smart. You have to know how to say things, sometimes as a story, but it's not the full story because it's just a sort of like a point of light that you're putting out, even with the story, to get a point across. But it's not what the person will do when he hears it. It's not what impact it will make on the person. It's not the whole story. It's just a single event. The full story is at the end of the day. Is at the end of a person's life, at the end of an era. Now I can tell the whole story. And that becomes a book. That's already something completely different. That's passive confidence already. So one interesting way of understanding the difference between them is like the difference between the way that I write my ideas out as they come. And that's like the head fill-in, which is relatively, like we said, more masculine. Each idea is in its own compartment. Each one is in a different chamber. They're organized, but they're separated. They're not yet coherent. They don't make up a story yet. And that's the first stage of working on confidence. It's a very interesting thing. It means that to have confidence, more than having active confidence is about achieving a big goal, it's more about achieving punctuated goals, small goals. Active confidence in great people maybe can be a very big goal. But in us, active confidence is usually about my ability to carry out the next point that I need to achieve, the next thing on my list. And if I work like that, with each challenge being almost separate, then I've a lot more than the malleability comes from the fact that I can change my goals as I move along. Whereas in passive confidence, it's easier to see the whole picture, because in a certain sense it's already played out. So when Chizkiyahu sees, so you asked before, does David HaMelech know what he's going to do with each soldier of the enemy? So no, not exactly. What does it mean he doesn't know? He knows how to deal with each one. That if somebody comes to him from here, this is what he does. If somebody comes to him from here, that's what he does. He doesn't know what the order of the events is going to be, because war is very messy. So he doesn't know exactly what he's going to do with each one. He hasn't played it out that way. But he knows what the strategy against each type of movement of an army is, or the movement of a battalion, or a movement of a single soldier even. He knows how to answer each threat. And he knows how to finish it off. He knows what it means to finish it off. He knows what that looks like. But he can't tell you beforehand. He's not a prophet in that sense that is seeing the whole thing unravel. On the other hand, the passive confidence, it has an advantage, like Chizkiyahu, who could see, he's the most passive confidence out of all the kings that we talked about. So he could see what it meant to win against Assyria. He knew what it meant. What did it mean? That every single last soldier of the Assyrian army would be either dead or run away. And that's exactly what happened. He had a picture of what that was. He didn't have to deal with how exactly it happened. It's like he has a bigger picture.
He had the whole story.
He had the conclusion.
But the one that doesn't know exactly what he's going to do, that's the active, the passive.
Because you know, you know.
In either one, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do.
Right.
In the passive, it's because I have no power to do. So I'm not going to do anything.
Right.
But I have a clear picture. It's almost like a book that's been written. I already know how the ending goes.
So when
But I
it's
can't
active,
control it.
When it's active, you have a picture.
And the other is writing the story as he goes along, but
Right.
you can't write the story in its final form. You're writing punctuated
But
events.
Chizkiyahu had the whole picture.
It's
in
like a
general.
book that's already been
In
written.
general, yeah.
It's sequential, like first you
It
have
doesn't
the
seem
Muna,
like
then
it
you
is.
have the passive, then the active, is it?
Suddenly does not seem
No, no, no.
sequential at all.
Which one?
I
does
used to
it?
think it was from other classes in Torah Nefesh that like the passive confidence and then the active confidence. Now I just feel like
No,
they're two
they're
different
not
ways of
sequential.
living your life.
Good, completely different.
And they both have advantages.
Right,
And there's
right,
no
exactly.
reason to be one over the other.
There is a reason.
It's not.
If I don't know what to
Whatever
do,
your circumstances
if I have
are,
no tools,
then
then
you're not
it
gonna
depends
pass.
on then I have to be passive. If I don't have any picture at all, I have to go back to faith. Yes, of course. They're completely parallel. They're
it's-
not sequential at all.
It's components of the soul and the personality,
Right,
but it comes
right,
together like
right,
this.
right,
And
right.
you can.
And in some things they'll
Work
come
with-
together for me. I have a story, and in some things they don't.
Right.
Active confidence is sort of like I may have a general idea of what I want, but it comes in punctuated bursts.
And you know that
This
you
I
know.
want to do.
Every
This I
burst
want to do.
you
This I
know.
want to do.
So
I
what,
have
The
to finish
active
it.
confidence is every burst I know that I know.
I have to finish it.
And
Okay.
it's
Right.
because you know this is coming
Right.
and you know this is your.
I know how to react to it.
Yeah.
This is the idea
It's
that
like
I
you
now
have to really
have.
stay connected
Right.
all the time, right?
So in writing, it's very simple. It's an idea that came to me. It's not finished until I write it down, but it's not going to become a story yet. It's just one idea. It's just one thing that goes into a separate compartment.
Chizkiyahu was a prophet, so obviously he could have that experience of passive confidence and have the story and not
Where
have
did you
the
get that
details.
he's a prophet?
He didn't foresee.
He was a king.
He was a king, wasn't
Fine,
he?
he was a king, but it seems like okay, sorry, I don't know, in my head for a minute, it
It's
felt
not
like a prophetic
foreseeing.
experience.
It's not. You could say that
Because
this
he
is
had
very
100%
close.
confidence.
You could say it's close, but it's not a prophetic experience.
Fine.
Confident.
What
If,
would this look like in a modern day person's life to have a Chizkiyahu experience? That he has the whole story and he has 100% confidence.
every day people came to the Rebbe with this question, the questions about their health.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "You're not a doctor. You should not worry about the details, how this is going to happen. That's not for you. That let the doctor worry about. He's studied medicine. He knows what the tools are. He knows how to affect health.
Mm-hmm.
What you have to do is have a picture of what you're going to look like at the end." That's passive confidence. Because I don't know, for me to spend time worrying about the treatment, whether it's working and so on, is not my duty. And I'm hurting the treatment if I do it. Every doctor would love to have patients who just blindly follow what they say. The biggest problem that doctors have is that patients don't do what they tell them to do. I'm not kidding. This is 100% if you, across the board, you ask doctors, what's the biggest problem that we have in helping people? It's the people themselves. That they don't do what they're told. Why? Because we worry about it, because we think we know better. That's why the internet has really completely, derailed all their efforts. Because now, it turns out that the patient might actually know more than the doctor. It's not very common, but it happens, at least know a lot. And so they have to begin to form opinions. But it's not the same thing. Even a doctor who has any brains doesn't go to himself to treat himself. He goes to somebody else. Why? Because to get better, you have to take that off your mind. Health is not about the actual treatment. To think that is to miss the whole point of medicine. Health is about creating a new form of regularity in the body that will push it away from where it is now and move it in a different direction. That's what doctors do. They don't heal anything. They change your regularity. They change the way your body functions. Nobody knows how to heal anything. Period. Nobody knows how to heal anything. You have to know that. What we know how to do, we've always done this, is change the veset, it's called, by the Rambam. It's changing the regularity. Because what caused the illness is an incorrect regularity. You've been doing things over and over in a detrimental way. The doctor has to bring you back on track to a regularity that does work, because the body heals itself. It just needs to be pushed in the right direction. And so the biggest detriment to that is when you come in and say, but I know better. So today I'll take it, tomorrow I won't. Doctors go crazy over this because they never know if you took the pills, you didn't take the pills. The pills don't heal you. It's not the pills. It's the new regularity that does. Obviously I'm oversimplifying because pills do something. But we're not talking about Tylenol. What?
They re-regulate you.
Okay, they re-regulate. Doing some very complex chemical processes.
Or other treatments.
That's why we have very strong regulators. Our pills are pretty strong. Our medicine is very strong in terms of its ability to create new regularity. In the past, their regularity wasn't so much less than what we have today. But in the end, you have to understand that what works is passive confidence. You have to have confidence that this is what's going to work, and stop overthinking it, because that's not what's going to help you.
Okay. I appreciate the distinction you just made. Like they're not sequential, and I see how they're just two ways of accomplishing something. But the parable still doesn't work for me, because in the
With
what
writing?
you spoke about, but like the story, of course, is a composite of all those pebbles
Points.
of ideas.
Right.
Of course it is.
Right.
The music symphony is from
Right.
all the musical phrases.
Right.
So they are sequential in that parable, and then suddenly in
Oh,
reality
no,
you're saying they're not.
Here you're
It's
right.
confusing.
The example that I'm bringing now is theoretically sequential, but it could not be also. Could also not be. How? That many times I have many pebbles of wisdom, and they don't become a coherent whole. Are they of no value? They're of tremendous value.
Right, but if you
And
to have a
sometimes-
compelling story, you must have it made up of beautiful details.
Right.
But the story, the passive confidence
Sometimes.
you're describing is a story with no details. I
Sometimes.
just see
Sometimes.
the end page.
But sometimes there are stories that didn't come from you, and you get them as a book. And they're very compelling, they're very good, but you never had any of the ideas. That's exactly what a book means.
Right, but the book, what do you mean?
It was
You
written by
see-
somebody
when you read
else.
someone's story, no, of course, but you appreciate.
But I'm talking about, but that's what a
bite
Beit Malesfarim means. I have all these books on my bookshelf. I didn't write a word of them. I get, they're not sequential for me. I get the final product right in front of me. Here it is. There's no sequence there. In fact, people make a living from analyzing, trying to figure out what the sequence was, if there was any.
So you're saying I can write my own story and never have
That's-
known the details.
No, that I didn't
Wow,
say. I
that's
said
a
that that's what a
Chizkiyahu.
book means.
That's in Chizkiyahu, that's how it manifests. He has the story and he has no details.
That's in Chizkiyahu's case. Ken, he doesn't know what the
passive
deals are.
confidence. you're
Right,
saying.
he doesn't know what the details are. That's true. But again, I'm focusing on there being a final form of a book, which is already like how you would treat passive confidence, as if I have the final form in front of me. I don't go from the sequences. I'm not sequencing my pebbles of wisdom into a whole understanding. I'm just going straight for the story. The story is, I was this, now I'm this. How this happened, I don't know. That's passive confidence. Here's the book, finished. It's right in front of you.
Well, it's going right straight to the happy ending.
Yeah.
You're not missing the story.
Right. But that's the story.
So they're both really good. No one is better than the other. They're both just Very
They're
different.
different.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
different types. But the chidush was, the Baal Shem Tov said that because I want to have active confidence, I need the Rabbeinu Tam Tefillin, which are relatively more masculine, and that they're relatively more punctuated, and that they give me the confidence to act in this world.
That's interesting because Hasidus is considered feminine,
Mm-hmm.
and he's bringing down the.
Right.
That's
In terms of understanding the Torah, Chassidus is more feminine.
right.
In terms of its approach to the world, Chassidus is more masculine.
Right.
Chassidus interprets the Torah more feminine, in a more feminine way,
Right.
because it's dealing with how the Torah reflects the psyche, how it reflects our inner processes. But when it comes to this is, by the way, one of the biggest switches that the Rebbe did. It wasn't such a switch when you understand what he did, but they call it today turning Judaism outwards. Chassidus was always turned outwards, because what did the Baal Shem Tov want? To bring Mashiach.
Right.
He wanted to actually do an act to bring Mashiach. He didn't say Mashiach will come anyway. Suddenly Mashiach says to him, for me to come, you have to do A, B, and C. That's a whole new understanding of what our role in the world is. So relative to reality, Chassidus is very masculine. Which again surprises people, because then you come in and say, so why are you against forming a state in the land of Israel? We're not against it. We're just not this. That's all.
Right.
Very, very active. Why you think it's imperative to live here and to do things and so on, to conquer the land and to populate all of it, to settle all of it and so on. These are all imperative. Just not this way, because this way in the end is not a good vessel for what we want to do.
I see an active conflict.
But to say it even more is because this way puts us at odds with the rest of the world, and that's not the point. But the way of setting up a separate nation state is automatically puts you at odds, and that was never the intent of Yiddishkeit. The intent of Yiddishkeit has always been to change the entire world. But the moment that you have your own interests front and center, you'll always draw a position. You'll draw a position anyway, but you can't put it in front of you, because then you end up wasting all your time on what are your interests. And they should be secondary, completely secondary. That's not what should be the main focus of the Jewish people today. That's another... But yes, that...
Ultimately, we do have a kingdom, a Melucha, that's ours. That belongs to, that is Mashiach is the king, and the Jewish people come here, and it's our place. Or, yeah.
Maybe I fell asleep and I woke up in Gan Eden. I don't know. I don't know what you're
No,
talking
but that's
about.
supposed to happen. That we are supposed to have what's
Ultimately,
called-
that's a big question. Who's Mashiach for? Is Mashiach for the Jewish people? Is he for the nations? It's a big discussion in all of literature, in all of Jewish literature. Who is Mashiach for? There's a strong opinions in throughout the ages that Mashiach is not for us.
Not for us?
No, we don't need him. We have Torah. Yeah, we can get along without him. We've gotten along without him for as long as we have. Do you think he's really going to make a difference for
Well,
us?
Mashiach changes the reality.
But he changes the reality for the whole world. As far as I'm a human being, yes, Mashiach is also for me. But as far as I'm a Jew, it's not so clear that I need him. That's a different discussion. It's a big, huge discussion that has a lot of repercussions to it. Okay, so let's summarize and conclude that active confidence is more like taking each event as it happens, having confidence that you can bring it out. And when it comes to the more intellectual side of life, or the more experiential side of life, if you want, both of them, active confidence means writing the notes, writing the shortened version, condensing it. Here's what happened. Having a good idea of how I can put it into a compartment by itself, and it stands by itself. The passive confidence is already, how do I take everything and tell a story from it? So again, there, if I'm the one doing it, it's a sequential act. Okay? if I'm not the one doing it, so I may just get a book and read the book and enjoy
Chizkiyahu
it,
didn't,
and from the book I get passive
it
confidence.
wasn't sequential for Chizkiyahu.
What?
He wasn't sequential for
No,
Chizkiyahu,
for him
and he
it
was the
wasn't.
one doing it.
For him it wasn't, because we're not talking about telling a story. He didn't write his book. Actually, it says of Chizkiyahu and his court were the ones who wrote some of the books of the Tanakh. So there is something about him actually writing things in the end.
Maybe it sounds like there's a metaphor and then there's like the reality.
There's-
But Chizkiyahu experienced the taste of a story in his life without having it being sequential, right? He saw the story, he saw the end of the story. That was his
Right, but he only saw the end. It's not clear
that was perfect. The story happened well. No?
What? Good.
Manifested
That's
perfectly.
passive confidence.
Right.
The best thing is to get the story from somebody else. It's even better. A lot of what we live in Yiddishkeit is a story that somebody else told.
So my passive confidence can either be the story that I threaded together or that Hashem
Let's say it like this.
gave to me.
That the fact that I believe that there is a happy ending to all of Yiddishkeit, that can be not just faith, where everything might happen, anything might happen, but rather the way the Rambam, for instance, wrote it at the end of his book, that this and this and this will happen, that gives me only passive confidence. But active confidence is what he says, contrary to the whole story I've told you, he says, and nobody knows how things will come to pass when they actually come to pass. He has a whole story about what's going to happen, and then he says, he like debunks the whole story with one sentence. He says, "Ve'en adam yodeh ech yהיו הדברים עד שיהיו." Nobody can tell you beforehand how this is actually going to come about. When it actually comes about, it might be completely different. Why? Because when it actually comes about, that's already active confidence. And in active
That's
confidence,
you threaded the story.
because it's you doing the punctuated act. And each one may be a little bit different than the story he
So
told.
what he's telling is a passive.
Right. The story, again, if you live Yiddishkeit as a story, good. That's passive confidence. It's very good. There's nothing wrong with it. But it can't give you active confidence.
Mhm.
The active confidence comes from
You're not
each
playing an
event.
active role in it. It's
Right.
like you're
Right. You can't play an active role in the story
writing
that you're
the
reading.
story. Yeah.
The thing that's confusing is that when you write a story, you're writing it.
Right.
But in the end, it's passive. You're giving about something that's passive. There's no action to be taken anymore. It's just threading it together. So you can't change anymore. In that sense, they're not dependent on one another. They don't relate, as it were.
I think I just have to say I'm reading someone else's story, then it's very clear.
So the bottom line from all of this is really that you have to do both types of writing. That you can't really work through anything unless you are willing to do the writing at the level of each idea, each day, each event that happens, and so on, and encapsulate it into something, get something from it. But those are points. And the passive confidence is the ability afterwards, which you also have to try to do, whether it's with your life, or with these ideas, or with these words, or whatever they are, of threading it together and making it into something whole. Rashi was the tefillin that was used mostly until the time of the Baal Shem Tov, because it was a passive type of confidence. It was more believing the story, trusting in the story. The story will happen. The Baal Shem Tov, he added the Rabbeinu Tam tefillin because he says you have to take an active role in the story. You have to create the story. The events of your life, the confidence that you'll have in each act that you do, that is what's going to actually make the story real, not just a story.
That's what Moshe said to him
Right.
when the well springs are spread. So
Right.
we each have to find our own way to spread the well
Right,
springs
right,
and
right.
actively find
Exactly,
our way,
exactly.
not just
There's
believe
an
it.
action that needs to be taken.
That's the difference. And the Rebbe took that.
Right.
I'm getting it.
Yeah.
The Rebbe took it to
Right.
him. And also
So the Rebbe really didn't change anything in Chassidus, but it took time for people to understand what the Baal Shem Tov was saying. Meaning, all through the generations, the Rebbeim were saying the same thing, but it wasn't. You keep looking for a way to get it through people's heads, because we're simple. We don't really get the message. I'm not sure that I understand the message today, okay? But I know that enough time has passed, and the Rebbe showed an example of how you actually do it. This time it clicked. People got it. The fact that the Rebbe has more embassies in the world than any of, you know what? It might be more embassies in the world than the G20 together. You think about that. You think about what that means. What does that mean? That you put all the G20 countries together, I don't think they have as many embassies as the Rebbe does. It's ridiculous. So he did something here that completely switched people's minds. He took 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 families that devoted themselves to being emissaries. There was nothing like this ever in history. If you just meditate on that, just understand that point, understand what he did. This is not like anything we've ever seen. The Roman Empire didn't do this. Nobody did this. Okay, so from that you can begin to think about what
Can
you
you
need
think
to
of
do.
it like, this is like there are two ends? Like the passive and the active, and actually they're gonna come together in the middle?
Hopefully.
Like, no, that you have to work on
Or
both at
maybe
the
they
same
happen at the
time.
same time.
Right, that they're happening at the same time and eventually the picture merges.
Could be.